Welcome along to Tweet Street Scotland Occupied, home of the satirical satire. I'm Cinnamon Bridges, aka Peter. I don't have a co-host this evening, but I need to pass my best on to my co-host JB Whitesnake, just to let him know I'm thinking about him. Sorry he's had to pull out at the last minute. We're doing a political special where we have members of the ISP. So I'm going to introduce Julia Panel, Brooke Rinn and Naya Putso. I'm going to ask, first of all, Julia, for anybody who doesn't know who you are, can you give us a wee bit of detail about who you are and who you represent, please?
Well, I'm Julia Panel. I'm the communications officer of the ISP, and also, I think, still the secretary of the Northeast branch.
You are.
Yes. Yeah, as you can tell from the accent, I'm from Wales. I moved here 35 years ago. I always voted SNP. I wasn't always a member, but I was always a voter and a supporter, particularly since 2014. But then sort of 2017, it became apparent they were kind of going nowhere with independence. And eventually I'd had enough. I left in 2020. And the next day I joined the ISP. At that time, it was about independence. And I didn't realise what they were doing with the gender reform stuff that was going on. That just came later, but it's principally because I felt the ISP was, more serious about independence and was actually going to try and shake things up a bit. So, yeah.
Can I ask, for any of our subscribers who don't know what ISP stands for, can you let the people know what ISP stands for, what it means?
Just the Independence for Scotland Party does what it says in the tin.
Thank you very much. Brooke, what about you now?
Well, I have been in Dundee for 16 years, but I could only vote from last April 2020. So I was very excited because I really supported Scottish independence in 2014. Unfortunately, it didn't work out, but me and my Wiganer husband were out with the flags all over the van and painting our faces and really, really hoped it would happen. But so I was looking for a party to support. Wasn't so crazy about what was happening with women's rights. So I was looking for anything, any women's rights supporting party, and Independence for Scotland Party kind of appeared on Twitter. And I messaged, realized now it was Colette, and went, what's your stance on women's rights? And they went, wow, this is our, yes, we believe that women are women. And yeah, it was good. And I went, what about UBI? What do you think about UBI? And they went, well, we have a policy committee. If you join the party, you could be on the policy committee. So I just jumped in and been keeping myself busy with ISP ever since.
Excellent. Naya, over to you, please.
Hi there. I'm a post-op transsexual. I had all the surgeries and changed my gender as such, kind of. I can expand on that later on. Okay. About 30 years ago. And I was voting SNP, lifelong supporter. And then when they started thought the mixing with the GRA and all this trans thing, I thought, no, I can't vote for you anymore. And ISP popped up on Twitter, and I wasn't even on Twitter. I was happily going about in my own little world until somebody said, "Oh, get onto Twitter." And I saw it, and I thought, "Oh my God, this is way out of hand." So I'm coming up from the supporting the women's side, the women's rights side, and joined the ISP as a member.
Excellent. Thank you very much to the three of you for coming along this evening and hopefully expanding on the message that ISP are delivering. So I'm going to pick up something that Brooke mentioned in her intro, but I'll come to Julia first of all. Can you tell us about UBI, which for anybody who doesn't know is Universal Basic Income, and the party's stance on it, please? Julia.
Well, Universal Basic Income, UBI, is a policy that we're in favour of, that everybody gets a basic income regardless of their own income. It would partly be paid for, I believe, by if you do take a job, you would not have any kind of tax-free part that we do have now. We have tax-free earnings, so you'd pay tax on everything, and that would be a way of them recouping what they're paying out. It's just, it would allow people to relax. It would allow mental health to be improved, really, because people wouldn't be so stressed by working in exploitative jobs. It would give them the choice of whether they worked. It would give more chance for creative stuff. If you're a painter or whatever, very rarely will you be able to, indulge that. And we could be losing all sorts of things by not allowing people to have support that basically allows them to fulfill their potential, which is to the benefit of everybody. I mean, the problem with it so far is it's been trialed in small areas, or it's been trialed in Scotland and in Finland and I think other places. It's never really worked. But I was looking for one of my blogs a long while ago, was at Barbados. They're looking at bringing in a universal basic income, and it's not a country you would normally think of as a rich country that could afford it. It's just that's been the political will. They've decided they've got basically a sovereign wealth fund, and they want to give some people a bit of income out of that. And they also plan to sell government assets, some government assets, some things they've got, and fund it that way. So they're looking at various things they can do, and they're a country much smaller than Scotland. So I think it's something we have to keep an eye on and see how they do, and tweak it from there. But I think, yes, the party is in favour of it, and it would be a good thing for Scotland, I believe.
Excellent. Brooke, can I get your interpretation on it, please?
Well, for me, I first got interested in relation to the states, and they were thinking UBI for the whole of the US, for everybody to get like $1,000 a month, would cost about 1.6, 1.7 trillion, which seems like a huge amount. But the cost of child poverty in the US is 1 trillion. Just child poverty existing in the US costs the US $1 trillion. And you're going, oh, yeah, it's actually very expensive to have a large population that's poor, that's struggling, that are, maybe they feel like they can't work because their benefit will be cut, or they can't work because they're trying to take care of their kid, but actually they still need some money coming in. Just the illness and the stress and the mental health toll of people being trapped in poverty and feeling trapped in poverty has a massive cost. And it's very difficult to measure. I couldn't find the stats on what child poverty in Scotland costs us, but I know it's huge because there's a lot of really poor people. There are places in Scotland where, the average lifespan is almost half of what it should be just because of the poverty. And you're going, Scotland's a rich country. It's one of the probably 20th richest countries in the world, not part of the UK, just on its own.
Yep.
And there is absolutely no reason for poverty to exist in a rich country. And even on a local level, Dundee, it's really expensive to have people struggling. Yeah. And the cost builds up over time. If someone lives in poverty as a child, that's going to cost you a lot more over their lifetime. And actually lifting them and their family out of poverty is probably going to give you a lot more. Yeah. Because of the potential that would have been wasted, because they're not able to focus in school because they're hungry or they're cold or whatever. They might be the person that figures out some of the big questions that we answered in terms of the environment and stuff. It's a big waste of the talent that I think exists here. And I don't think we can afford not to. So
sounds really interesting when you put that sort of spin on it. It's a case of,
because people think about the cost and they go, oh, but it's so expensive. And you go, yeah, but the actual cost of having poverty is so much greater. Yeah. It's so much more. I don't think people can even properly, all of us know people who, we've met who've lived in poverty, or their families lived in poverty and they've come out of it, and it follows you down the generations. It's trauma. Yeah. And it stops you from fully contributing to your society in the way that you maybe potentially could have.
Yeah, realizing your full potential.
That's a massive waste.
Yeah, well, I'm for it for the sounds of it so far. Naya, what's your take on it as a member of the party?
Yeah, well, it's something I don't really know much about, but I mean, I like the concept of it, because the universal credit system is so convoluted,
Mhm.
and it really restricts people. I've got friends who are students, and they say, I'll lose this and I'll lose that if I try and work more than 17 hours, and it's so a system that, I mean, I don't think it would. I think that if we bled it in gradually, rather than just dropping like this will be £1,500 for everybody, and people would just be, oh my god, this is too much. So if we gradually brought it in, I think that's a possibility. We have to do something, because we just seem to be going round and round in circles with. This is 2022, and we've got poverty. We've got kids going hungry at schools and what have you, food banks all over the place. So whatever we're doing, we're not doing right. So I'm open to suggestion, put it that way.
I mean, but certainly I'm the same myself. It's something that of interest, and as you say, we could be doing better in a society in 2022, as you mentioned there, Naya, where you've got kids that are hungry, that may not get a meal. And I read some horror stories that on the summer holidays there are certain families that the parent or teachers worry about the kid returning after the summer holiday because they know what it's like during the school term. So yes, I think we definitely need to do something, because poverty is on the increase in Scotland. Right, so we'll move on, because obviously we're getting more and more under pressure with some of the announcements of late, with energy increases, etc. The Alba Party Alba Party leader Alex Salmond had suggested a council tax freeze. Julie, I'm going to come to you first of all on this and say, what's your thoughts on a potential council tax freeze? Are you for or against it, or do you have another alternative that you think may work?
In theory, yes, but the problem is councils have lost so much money for decades, and they're really, really struggling for cash. So I don't know, maybe it should be a limited rise. Kate Forbes has given 120 million extra to councils. She thinks that's the equivalent of them raising it by 4%, so that they shouldn't have to actually raise it for the consumers. I think the problem is, though, it's easy to look and say, people are poor, they can't afford it, but services suffer. In the end, you can only cut so much. The councils can only cut so much. Scotland's been given, I think, like England's got this £150 tax rebate, council tax rebate, to help people with their bills in general. And Scotland's been given 290 million for that. But she's not said yet what she's going to spend it on, or how it's going to get out there to help people with their electricity bills. I think there has to be something more from government. I'm not really blaming the Scottish government. There has to be something better from government. They're giving us all apparently a £200 reduction in our bills, which is actually a forced loan, which you have to repay over 5 years, which isn't that great. I suppose it's better than paying it all up at once, but it's not, basically they're giving the money to the companies. So they're subsidizing the companies rather than us. And then the companies will be getting their money back. Other countries are doing much more to help their populations with the energy rises. I mean, France just refused to let the company raise its prices by 45%, which is what they wanted to do. They said, you limit it to 4%, that's it. Germany's doing the same. I think Denmark's giving cash to each family. Norway's taking money out of its oil fund, its sovereign wealth fund, and giving it to everybody. The UK government just won't do that kind of thing, because they basically care about companies rather than people. If they care about the multinationals, they care about profits rather than people. So it's difficult to see what you can do apart from changing the government's mind. I think the Scottish government's got limited manoeuvrability at the moment, but hopefully we'll get some concrete news about what they're going to spend the 290 million on. Hopefully we all get a check as well, but I don't know.
Brooke, same question. I'll come over to you on.
In terms of the council tax, we were discussing a little bit earlier, it just the way that it's people have to pay, and then what people's property and the use by the council is actually worth. You know, there's a lot of people with big houses with lots of bins that honestly use more of the council's resources than somebody in a tiny flat, but they're paying similar bands of council tax. And I think there should be something like a land value tax. And obviously that's part of our land reform policies, that some of it we can do now and some of it we can't do unless we're independent. So it's about councils actually going, well, where can we find the money from maybe people that own quite a bit of property or abandoned buildings that are just sitting there empty because they're a big investment, but actually you could be charging people to sit on it and they would hopefully do something with it rather than it just being empty and, you know, kind of money in the bank for them. So I think the councils need more money, but I don't think it should come from a council tax raise, because I think people are just too squeezed right now, unless you're going to give them something like a local UBI, which I think you could even start very, very small and just go, okay, we're going to start to work on some property taxes. We might not get much at first, but we'll see where we can find the money. And as we get it, we will distribute it kind of evenly in a UBI type trial. There's lots of, the problem is always that, well, there's not enough money, but there just is. You know, there's been so much money pretty much magicked out of thin air for COVID recovery. And I was lucky enough to get some help from the council as well as from the government itself. And then I have lots of friends that were self-employed that got nothing. And a lot of companies that got quite a bit of money, and then a lot of individuals that got nothing. And you're going, there has to be a better way of actually giving everybody a bit of that massive chunk of cash that was just magicked out of thin air and went to wasteful stuff.
A bit of help for the wee guy, really. Naya, again, I'll come. Oh, sorry, Brooke, on you go. I see you were going to say something.
No, I'm done.
Okay.
Naya, well, I'm not done. I could go on and on, but you know.
Naya, I'll come over to you to see what your interpretation or what your thoughts of it are.
Well, about the council tax. Council tax freeze. Councils are incredibly wasteful. I mean, they really are. I mean, they do some projects, you're thinking, oh my God, what were you thinking when you thought that was a good idea? So a council tax freeze, yeah, I mean, they're struggling, it is. I mean, they've cut back in staff, and you can only cut back staff so much until people are just going off with stress because they've got so much to do. The Scottish government in their, is it 290 million? I think that'll go to the cities that please SNP. I mean, Aberdeen for one doesn't please the SNP, and they tend to get hit most. Or there's some controversy about that. They don't get the money they should get. But I find it ironic that France can say 4% energy increase, and we're 52%. So unless you're going to open up fracking to get the gas out the ground and reduce the bills that way, then I'm open to suggestions again. 52% is just ludicrous, because we're taking a full-on hit for energy. But I mean, look at France. They don't actually have oil and gas. They don't have oil and gas. They've got nuclear. And this obsession by Scotland is, we've got to be net zero. We can't save the planet. It has to be a world effort. And it's all very well for Germany to, I'm going down the green line, the argument, it's very well for Germany to raise their energy prices by, I don't know, 5%, but they're burning coal. I mean, they promised to be finished by 2038. So the emergency isn't until 2038, according to the Germans. So this obsession with net zero and lower carbon with Scotland, because there's a climate emergency, is all very well. But there's, for instance, is it Aberdeen or Dundee Council had to pull all their hydrogen buses off their fleet off the road, because they just couldn't cope with the wear and tear as diesel buses can do. So you've spent a fortune on a whole lot of hydrogen buses. And yes, the energy, the cost of fuel is effectively water for hydrogen. Yes, the fuel, the emissions are zero, but they're not on the road. They're in the garage getting fixed again. So
Yeah.
The council tax freeze, it's just, we've had well, put it the last couple of years, we've had council tax freeze. How well has it been? How well has that gone for everybody?
I've not noticed it going any better. I mean, I've noticed that although there's the council tax freeze, you now need to pay to have your green bin lifted that you didn't have to before, and then try to encourage recycling, but you need to pay to get the recycling done for your garden waste and things like that. So there are things that can improve. Just to come back on something that you had mentioned, Julie, about the grant that's going to be given. There's questions of the legality of the Chancellor's enforcement of this in every household. And also the enforcement of repaying it back over 5 years, and whether there's a legal right as an individual to do so. So hopefully that's exhausted in the legalities for it, and that can maybe help some struggling Scottish people and people in England and Wales, Northern Ireland as well. We're going to move on and ask about, talk about COVID recovery, and from the party's point of view. So Julie, I'll come to you. What sort of ideas would you be floating from the ISP's point of view for things for a COVID recovery?
Well, I think the trouble is we've got ideas about doing things that are quite different from, I think, most other parties, or at least parties at Westminster. You know, we want to build it back different. We don't want to just recover as it was and go back to what it was. We basically want to rip up the rule book, I suppose, and start again. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen. And I mean, I think we should be. I think the pandemic, it's exposed all the stuff that was at fault before. It's, you know, it was a system that basically used people and threw them out, ate them up, spat them out, and we need to have something that's much more community centered. I think we need, as a society, to take big multinationals to task. We need to, you know, we're kind of held to ransom. We get low paid jobs or no jobs from multinationals that want to come in. We don't seem to make any kind of conditions on, for example, them getting grants and things like that. But I think we ought to be building back, to be doing something like more community-based ideas. We should be financing from the ground up, not from the top down, which is what it is at the moment. I think it's like, for instance, with this Scott Wind leasing, there's no requirement for them to actually have supply chain investment. There's no requirement for them to invest anything in the local economy. And I think that's something that we should be doing. We should be very careful about who we go forward and invite into Scotland. And if we do invite them to tender for contracts, we have to demand some sort of a payback. I think we should, you know, as a party, I think we'd be encouraging more sustainable ways of going forward. It's not just the big things about green matters. It's about sustainability. It is about the circular economy. It is about putting things down to local level, which is, again, I think that borders then on local government reform. I think that's something we have to do and get that much more localized, because you've got a big unitary authority really, and then you've got community councils, and there's nothing in between. And we need to have much more genuine involvement, you know, a different level of involvement, so that we, you know, local people can make local decisions, and the funding should be much more widely spread. I think that's the key, because I think communities would make the right decisions then for themselves, instead of having it all dictated from essentially the centre.
Yeah, central office. Brooke, again, I'll just come to you again on it.
Yeah. The starting from the ground up and actually getting the local communities involved and asking them what they need. I think people know what their community needs, and this idea that some big central government can go, "Oh, we have a great idea for you. We're going to throw money at that idea." It tends to miss the people that actually need it. It's not the right fit, or it's kind of pie in the sky, weird conceptual ideas that are being forced on a group. And just, you know, people know what they actually need. And for COVID recovery, I'm really interested in getting my personal area down to COVID zero so I can get back to work. But that can be on a community level. You can make these very cheap, very efficient air purifiers and get them into every classroom and get them into every shop. And these very comfortable masks that were developed in Manchester, they're made in Wales, and they're just one little thin layer of fabric with viruferin, lactoferrin on it, and they're developing a spray. So you won't even need a mask. You can just spray your face with this protective coating. And all of these things are, relatively accessible, but they're not offered to local community. They're not made affordable. They're not being invested in. If they have a factory in Wales, why can't there be a factory in Scotland making these lightweight, comfortable masks and give them to every school kid, and making little easy air purifiers and put them in every classroom, and actually get the local community where we live, where we're trying to, protect people, and go, okay, what do you guys actually need? What's needed here right now? And how can we make that happen on a local level? Because there's so much waste, like Naya was saying, in community councils and on the wider council, funding and stuff. And you're always going, where'd they find money for that? It's that was a lot of money thrown into kind of a sort of silly, almost a folly sometimes. And they must not have spoken to anybody that lived there and asked them, what do you guys need? Because that was not what was needed. So
it's kind of a strange that. So there would be no chop them off the bottoms of doors or anything like that, right? So you don't need to answer that. That's just for me, for my own wee dig. Now I'll come to you on the same question.
For me, it's just making when people vote Labour or Tory in the council elections, it just seems like you're throwing your vote into the ether, and it's just going for the central idea. And the Scottish Government, SNP at the moment, if you make a vote, it's like Nicola and Patrick Harvey haven't grasped there's actually life beyond Glasgow or Edinburgh. They must think it's just wasteland or something. So the idea of, like, Glasgow seems to be the hub for everything, and they don't seem to care about, like, the Highlands. And if you're going to put up prices for petrol and all this sort of revenue, you got to think of these smaller areas, smaller villages, because all you're going to do is have people bring them out, like Highland clearances, back into the city because they can't get in it, or it's too expensive for them to live there. So if you could have a sort of policy that you, if somebody made a vote, or people voted in Dundee, ISP listened to and addressed what happened in Dundee and in Glasgow, but I had an overview of the whole proceedings in Scotland, but just make it more localized. Because at the moment, you put it that, this SNP, both votes SNP, and it was 1 million votes for one seat. I mean, utter waste of time. It was just crazy that. And SNP couldn't get past themselves. And you were talking to the drones when you said this is just a waste of votes, and not to waste of vote. And I think ISP is a way to go forward with that, because they actually, listen on a local level and address people who live in Invergowrie, because I mean, if you go to Teeling or something, honest to God, it's like Deliverance country out there. You're 5 miles outside Dundee, and you think you're in Deliverance country. They look at you like, oh, where are you from?
For anybody who doesn't know what Deliverance is, there's a famous banjo tune that comes to mind straight away. Right, anyway, now I'm going to stay with you. But before I ask you the next question, just want to touch on something that, again, that Brooke had mentioned, and it's been hinted at by also Naya and Julia as well. It's localizing things, centralizing things. Not everybody needs the same thing at the same time. I mean, we had localized lockdowns. So when COVID, when the pandemic had struck, and there was different levels of restrictions in each place, if they can do that for lockdowns, it makes sense to kind of exhaust it's different in each area. So therefore, we need to tailor it a wee bit. So I agree with what you're saying there. It shouldn't be. Scotland is not just Glasgow or Edinburgh. There are much more beautiful places, scenery-wise, throughout Scotland that should be catered for. A lot of rural communities that are suffered just as bad as other areas within cities. So I think that needs to be something that we look at. Now I'm going to come on to you and ask you this question first of all. And it's about the GRA. I know you've got lived experience, so I'd like you to tell us about your thoughts on the GRA, that's the Gender Recognition Reform Bill, as it's about to be, or possibly about to be introduced or passed through the committee somewhere towards the end of this month. Your thoughts on it as it's being floated, and also was that something that kind of attracted you to become a member of the ISP because of their stance on it?
Yes, to the second part, this is, I mean, I'm going to give you guys sort of the trans 101 for the next few minutes. This is 2022, and I can see things, believe it or not, that you can't. Well, you can, but you can get investigated by the police for what you're thinking. And it's happened to women. Yeah, but I can see it, and nothing would happen to me because I'm of the trans ilk. But the GRA 2004, the Gender Recognition Act, if you look at it, the first few lines has got transsexuals. Now, the GRA was for transsexuals, me. I'm medically diagnosed, and that's the difference between transsexuals and transgenders. Medically diagnosed, transgenders as an umbrella term that covers all sorts of things, you know, even transvestites, or gender fluid, as I call them, or gender identity, which is sort of a posh 20th century version of the old transvestite as such. So the GRA, this reform that they're bringing in, first of all, I'd like to say that this trans women are men, okay? Trans men are women. You can't change your sex, you can't change your gender, and you can't change your age. It's just not possible. I've done all the surgeries, all of them. I mean, I've done loads, and I'm still biologically male, and that is a fact. And that's what the transsexuals mainly say. We're the ones that are real. The SNP love us so much that they've actually eradicated the transsexuals from the hate crime bill. We don't even exist there. So, because transsexual is an offensive term for the new trans, because we are real about our biology. So the GRA will lead on to the GRC, which is a gender recognition certificate, which means this where it really affects women and men. You'll be able to change your birth certificate to female, trans woman to male to female, a woman to female to male. And that's going to be huge. That'll be a huge, and they can do it in 6 months. I mean, it's just, it took me 8 years to have the final surgery, the actual bit at the bottom surgery. 8 years it took me to get to that stage. They're going to do it in 6 months. So, and there's going to be according to the Scottish government, there's going to be a cooling off period. I mean, the cooling off periods, you could go off to France and pick grapes and come back. Hey, presto, I'm a woman, and you get it in. You get your birth certificate changed, which will impact on the Equality Act massively. It'll become unworkable. And the fact that the Scottish government are just waving their hands and saying it's not, it won't affect in single sex spaces. Yes, it will, because these trans women who will be intact males, because you can't have that kind of surgery in 6 months. You just can't. It just doesn't. It wouldn't. There's no way you get it unless you went private and went to Thailand for 6 months. Will be intact males, and they'll be legally female, not biologically female, legally female. So they'll be able to go into female single-sex spaces, into prisons, which they're doing already, hospital wards, sports. It's all happening, but they'll be able to do it legally. So the Equality Act will become unworkable for women and men. Men won't be bothered about it because trans men, women, female to male, they're not a threat. You know, you're an ex-boxer, they'd be like, yeah, so what? But for women, well, big difference, because trans women are men and they are stronger. I mean, I've had surgery 30 years ago, and I went into the gym. I stopped smoking, went into the gym, and there was a woman there who'd been there for about 6 months. And the very first thing I outlifted it. And I've been on HRT for about 29 years now. So I've been on, yeah. So yeah, I'm stronger. So yeah, it'll have a huge effect on women and girls' rights, definitely. Because you the again the Equality Act. And the thing is, you can't change your sex. And the thing about the GRA, the whole thing about the GRA, which really, the Scottish government, there's 2 gender clinics in Scotland, one in Glasgow, one in Edinburgh. If you want to get an appointment, I mean, I've heard it's like 4.5 years, 4 years to get an appointment, and then maybe another 6 months before you actually see somebody. Well, if you take away the requirement for medical diagnosis with the GRA, then you've just sorted out the gender identity clinics. The GRA will remove the need for medical diagnosis. And if you remove the need for medical diagnosis, then you're going to get kids, autistic, dysmorphia, Munchausen kids, traumatized kids being diagnosed wrongly, potentially as trans, and sent down a pathway of hormones and surgery. And that'll be devastating. I mean, 5-10 years, there'll just be carnage. So the Scottish government, instead of just changing the law so that you can look in the mirror and go, yes, I'm female or I'm male, are removing the need for medical diagnosis. And you need medical diagnosis. This is Pandora's boxes hormones you're playing with. I mean, a female to male takes hormones for a month, and the voice drops. Facial haircuts. I mean, this is serious hormones you're doing. Kids will get sterilized. So medical diagnosis, this Gender Recognition Act, the Gender Recognition Certificate is just to save money. And the SNP will save a fortune because you won't need the gender clinics if you can just look in the mirror and change your legal sex.
That's I mean, when you put it like that, but I've been trying to do a wee bit of research, on it over the past couple of years, really, and it's really worrying, the research that I'm doing. However, when you're putting it like in those basic terms, it's like it's eye-popping. Like, what's happening? Brooke, I'll come to you next, and we'll work our way back up to Julia. So, Brooke, what's your thoughts on the GRA?
I mean, basically, Naya's said it, and luckily, because it's actually allowed, and if I said it, I'd probably get a knock on my door. And that's what's so scary about the whole thing, because it's really about not only, keeping the Equality Act, not removing women's rights, but it's actually maintaining the rights of transsexuals and protecting children. And all of these things are being thrown out the window, not to mention the fact that transsexuals are a tiny, tiny percentage of the population. You're talking about maybe 1% of the population. Well, pedophiles are 5 to 6% of the population. And if you don't think that someone that would lie to get access to a child would lie and say they're a woman, you're nuts. And that's a massive, massive risk that I personally am very worried about. I'm really, not okay with the idea that basically, as far as I'm concerned, the worst people in the world will lie and say that they're transsexual, because when the backlash happens, and it will, all of these kids getting hormones and surgery and then going, oh, actually, I just had mental health issues, I needed help, and predatory men taking advantage of it, there's going to be a backlash. And the people that are actually going to experience that backlash are going to be actual transsexuals. And that's not okay with me. Like, we're talking about an actually marginalized group that are going to be targeted because they're going, oh, just let them all in. You go, that is the worst idea I've ever heard. Not only because it's terrible for people to get unnecessary, harmful surgeries, because these are not minor surgeries. These are major experimental surgeries that have lifelong consequences. There's no, quick undo. And really, but I can't say that. Even what I've just said now is, probably not okay. If I wrote any of that on Twitter, I'd be off.
Yeah, it's so strange how, I mean, even just at the weekend there, and I know that I had mentioned in Aberdeen, there was a stall at Aberdeen where a lot of, I don't know, it's TRAs. I think that the term is, it was a women's stall trying to try to put the message out about women's rights
Yeah.
and the gender recognition reform bill and the potential of what it is, and they tried to shut down that stall and stop that information from getting passed to the public
and intimidate them.
Yeah, intimidating women when that's what women are. That was the message that women were putting out. So for me,
And I
as
took
a
part in a stall
person,
in our growth, and people did come up to us and talk to us, but they were actually very reasonable. And we had a really nice, very long discussion. And it was actually quite good on both sides. But you know, the difference between the people that came up to me and the people that were at the stall in Aberdeen was their sex.
Yeah.
I had a couple of very nice, very pleasant trans men who had a nice long conversation with all of the women there and didn't threaten us and didn't intimidate us. And, you know, obviously we didn't agree on everything, but we actually could talk it out, and it was all very reasonable, and nobody was scared and nobody thought that some violence might erupt.
Yeah.
One thing I'd like to add is here's a question you can ask the trans ideology or Church of Trans or the trans activists or the people on Twitter, and I've asked it about 100 times, and that's why I think I got turfed off Twitter. I mean, I got suspended because I was I think once too many being biologically real about the ability to change sex, because you can't, and being told by certain MSPs that I was an adult human female, to the point where I didn't threaten one of them. I just said to them, well, why don't you and I go to court, Kirsty, and I'll produce my DNA and my chromosomes, and you can retract your I'm an adult human female, because I'm not. The one thing you could ask trans rights people, and I've asked 100 times, and it's me. I've said all you see in the papers, you see people draped in flags with trans rights are human rights, trans rights are civil rights, trans rights now, when do we want it now? You ask them, what rights don't you have in Scotland or the UK? And you will never get an answer. The only answer, what they want is women's rights. That's what they want. I don't need, I've got all the rights I need. You better know the legalities of me being transsexual if you're going to take me on. I mean, I know my rights. But trans rights, what rights do I mean, they compare themselves to the USA, and the USA is their rights are different. I mean, it's a bit draconian over there, but it's never been a safer or better time to be trans in the UK or in Scotland. And this sort of trans hyperbole of denying my existence, it's suicide. You're literally killing us. No, we're not. And that's absolute nonsense. This transgender day of remembrance, where you had ScotRail, I call them ScotRail, and some elements of the police saying, say their name, and they had this list of names. I couldn't even pronounce the names because these names were based in like South America. They're like prostitutes or trans prostitutes. If you say to them, or people out there maybe watching this video, how many people that were trans were killed in Scotland or the UK for being trans in the last 3 years? 0, not 1. Compare that with women being killed for being women by men, and you're into the hundreds. So this transgender day of remembrance is utter tosh. It's lies, and I get really annoyed about this. Councils roll it out with the trans day of remembrance, and you say to them, what rights don't I have? And bear in mind, you're speaking to a transsexual, a post-op trans, because I've got all the rights I need. So that's drivel. And the idea that NHS, we have a right to their services. Well, yeah, you do, but you're going to have to wait like everybody else. You don't have an automatic right to get implants. I mean, what you can get for being trans now compared to what I was offered was like, it's chalk and cheese. You get a wig fitting service, you get facial hair removal, I mean, I always asked about personal shopper. It was that kind of ludicrous. I thought, my God, compared with me, I got voice sort of manual go forth practice. But yeah, the trans rights, what rights, ask the question, what rights don't you have? And you'll never get an answer.
Never get an answer to it. Thanks very much for that. Now, Julie, I'll come to you so that if I get a response from you on it.
Well, I think what I think is quite well known. My worry with the amendments is that, I mean, I think people have got the wrong idea of it, for one thing. People think that it's going to apply for people who are fully transitioned. They don't have this idea that any man could identify as a woman. And I think that's the biggest problem of all, is that there's no safeguarding in this legislation. It allows men to just identify as women. They're aided and abetted in this already by the Scottish Government saying trans women are women. And then they're taking the Equality Act definition of woman and saying, well, I'm a woman as well. And that's how they're trying to subvert women's single-sex spaces. They can get into women's single-sex spaces because they're women, according to the Scottish Government. And that, for me, is the big problem, is that it's a problem that's trivialised for a start. Mm-hmm. It becomes bathroom wars when it isn't. It's about fairness. It's about all women shortlists, women's sports. It's about safety and safeguarding of children and things like that. I think what I found very disappointing is the way that the Scottish Government and the local MSP and MPs, they're not listening. You know, you could write to them and say, what about this? What about this? What about, you know, breaches of the Equality Act that are happening? And they write back and they just don't address it. They say, oh, we're upholding the Equality Act. Well, no, you're not. You know, what they are doing is redefining women, and they aren't holding up the rights we have under the Equality Act. And I think that's something that we want to completely restate, that those rights are there, and that the Scottish Government can't actually take them away. But it puts us in an awkward position in a sense, because we're an independence party fighting the Scottish Government, which is really hard to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's a lot of people just say, wish for Indy, it's not important enough, you know, don't sacrifice independence, we'll sort it all out. Well, I think men would fight it if it was happening to men. They wouldn't wait for Indy, they would be fighting it now, or yesterday. It wouldn't have got this far.
Yeah.
And I think another big problem is that the Scottish Government seems to have been bewitched by certain elements, shall we say, and has been changing its policies by stealth for a long time before anybody even realised. I think that's the big problem. I think now, you know, it isn't just us, it's organisations for Women Scotland, you know, and Fair Play for Women, things like that. They've brought it to the forefront what's actually happening, and it's not so easy for them to shut us up now and say, oh, well, you're overreacting, that would never happen. You know, there wouldn't be attacks on women, and it wouldn't make women more at risk. And we know it is making women more at risk.
Yeah.
So I think we need to stop the Scottish Government gaslighting us, apart from anything else.
Yeah, not just gaslighting us on that, but we'll come on to some of those things a wee bit later on. Now, I'm going to come back to you. We're going to talk about the EHRC. Just to get your thoughts on the intervention that they made, do you believe that this is fair? And also, do you agree with the treatment that they've received since making the intervention?
You're joking, right? Gosh, above. The EHRC drove me absolutely bats for a good number of years, because it's got a lot of companies saw the EHRC as verbatim, and they weren't. It was the Equality Act. And the EHRC, what's happened with, I think it's some women have given sort of roles. I can't remember the woman's name who's in charge. And she said to the Scottish Government, you know, well, actually hold your horses here. This will impact women's rights, or women's and girls' rights. We need to be some clarity here. And they've just been, it's funded, strangely enough, by a lot of men. I mean, the biggest problem I've ever had was with men who seem to understand the struggles of trans women by dismissing females. Is it because you don't understand what it is to be a female? I think that's the case. So it's always third parties. I know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody that's trans. You're like, oh, mate, you're speaking to a transsexual. I know. And this trans, and the way the EHRC, I mean, it's like they've spat in somebody's socks. I mean, the unions are bad. I mean, the unions it's come to something in 2022 where women are actually scared to speak out in an office. instead of getting descended upon by unions. I mean, I was an LGBT op because I had the audacity to say trans women are trans women. And I got told by the branch chairman that get her telt. That was the word I got. Get her telt. I said, you're saying this to a post-op transsexual. I think I know myself. Don't gaslight me, mate. Trans women are women. I said, well, this was captured by the Stonewall. It's all this diversity inclusion. And ironically about the trans law, they're the most exclusive. If you say one thing against the Church of Trans, you'll get absolute, they'll just come for you, crucify you. They go after JKR for stating biological reality, Rosie Duffield, Joanne Cherry for sticking up for women's rights, and they just descend on them. And they keep going on about inclusivity. We're marginalised. You're marginalised because you're marginalising yourself, because you're pushing women's rights and everybody back, and they're pushing. People feel like they're under siege at the moment, with all the cost of living rises and Ukraine and the green that we're all going to die in a climate crisis. Push, push, push. So people are pushing back. They're just like, hold on here. So the EHRC said, like, well, let's hang on a second here. We need to be sure that women and girls are protected. And the Scottish government have pretty much blown right past that. And they've been vilified by the likes of Owen Jones. He's a gay guy, I seem to recall. What's he got to do? Peter Tatchell, gay. What have you got to do with it? I even had a gay guy tell me that he was a trans expert. I'm like, hello? You are speaking to me, mate. I said, do I know about gay? What it is to be gay? No, I have no idea what it is to be gay. I said, I'll leave that to you. But you're then telling me about trans. I have no idea what it is to be a woman. I identify with women. That's the closest I can be to a woman. I have no idea about periods. Trans women don't get periods. They don't get menopause. That's just nonsense. And this, I've been on HRT for 5 minutes and I can't get the lid off a jar. No, you've always been weak, mate. That's got nothing to do with it. So the EHRC is, they're getting vilified for just saying, hold your horses. And if the trans want to be inclusive, then they should say, okay, let's hear both sides. The women want a discussion. The men want a discussion, but the trans, it's no debate. And you've got Stonewall, Scottish trans, LGBT. And why is it the Scottish government only entertained the LGBT groups, but didn't dismissed women's groups?
Yeah.
So it's not fair for the I'm glad that the EHRC stick to their guns. And the Scottish government, it just shows you the Scottish government are totally hook, line and sinker bought off by Stonewall. I mean, Stonewall are the ones that are controlling them. You've seen organisations going against Stonewall and saying, well, hang on, we're leaving this champion thing. Not the Scottish government, no, we'll throw money at them. Same with the Scottish Trans Alliance. Hook, line and sinker.
Yeah, more money towards them, less money towards women's groups. I've seen that, and it's I think everybody's seen that, it's evident. Brick, will come to you just for your thoughts on it.
It was really good to see, finally, after a very long time of them not actually doing their job, which was speaking out for equalities. It was really, and I know they got a lot of flack for it. I sent an email, thanking them. I know a lot of women did, and they got a nice email back going, thank you for, because at least there was some nice gratitude in addition to all of the abuse. But, that's their job. That's what they're meant to be doing. And I'm really glad that they finally did it. And me and Niall were talking about it, and I think I was much more optimistic about the fact that the Scottish government would actually maybe listen and take this very, professional advice on board. And I was like, nah, they're not gonna. And I'm like, oh no, you're right, probably. But I'm still hoping until we hear otherwise. I'm still hoping there's a chance that we can just turn this back just now, at least press pause.
If they're going to cut the bottom off doors, what do you think?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, right. So I'll come to Julia first. I'll come to Julia next to get Julia's thoughts on it, please, and the HRC's intervention.
Yeah, I mean, for a long time they were quite invisible. It's been a good week that they've intervened and said that the government has to rethink it, and they've been quite specific about the things that they think they're doing wrong, about all the things we've been saying about single-sex spaces, about prisons, refuges, communal stuff, communal changing rooms and the like, that we were just told, no, that's not happening. And now the Equalities and Human Rights Commission has said, yeah, actually it is, and you need to rethink it. And that's good. I mean, I do worry whether they'll take it on board. I don't know. I think we just have to keep pressing MSPs and say, look, you're going to come up for re-election one day. Think on what you're doing. It might not worry them yet, but I mean, 4 years isn't that long. No. Some of them will be retiring, they won't care. Some of them will be at the start of their careers, they will care perhaps. And I think if there's enough pressure from women, I don't actually think they can ignore it, because they can enact it. But if 80% of the population don't agree with it, is that going to happen? Is it going to happen? Is it enforceable? I think we need to look at it like that. We also need to remember that the Named Person Act, that was another mess that they created, and that was unstoppable. And then actually they did quietly drop it. So it's possible it'll be the same thing now. I think they were surprised by the level of opposition to this. And for a while they tried to tell us, no, everybody voted for it in May. It's like, no, they didn't. They voted for independence in May. And I think that they're having to listen now a bit more, at least. So I hope we can keep up the pressure and hopefully get it set aside.
Just to clarify, this is Tweet Street's view. This is my view on this. It's not. It's synonymous with the ISP. They seem to, after the HRC made their announcement on the same day, I believe, the First Minister tried to not valid their own interpretation of it, the same as she did with women's voices and concerns about the very same. As I say, this is Tweet Street's view, not representative of the ISP. Right, so we're going to move on to the next question, and this is an individual question. It's about your own individual thoughts on Partygate in particular. Again, not the party that you're representing, not ISP's thoughts, but as an individual. So I'm going to come to Brooke first, because I've came to Julia and Naya first other occasions. So I'll come to you first, Brooke. What's your thoughts on Partygate?
Well, I've been annoyed at how much coverage it's getting, just because I think there are more important things to focus on. But on a personal level, we lost my mother-in-law in...
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, April 2020. And we couldn't be with her in the hospital. Her whole care home got COVID in Wigan, and most of them died. And we couldn't speak to her on the phone because the COVID phone wasn't available. We couldn't go see her. We couldn't be with her, and we couldn't attend her funeral. And her funeral was on the same day as one of the parties that we're now finding out there were many. And, she got double bagged and thrown in the ground. And I mean, this woman was a nurse for the NHS her whole life and kept volunteering at the hospital after she retired. It's just, they should be ashamed of themselves.
Thanks very much for sharing that, Brooke. Julia, I'll come to you next. What's your thoughts as an individual on Partygate?
Obviously, I think it's disgraceful that they were making us stick to the rules. I mean, a lot of people had inconvenience. Some people had, bereavement, which is obviously much worse, and weren't allowed to be with relatives and things like that. It just shows how to touch the government is, really, that they don't actually care, that they're laughing about themselves breaking the rules. And sadly, I think it's all too inevitable, to be honest. I think it's awful, but it's just the latest thing. Yeah. They've done so much, and and yet people put up with them. People say, oh, well, it's not so bad. They've done other things and they've done Brexit and whatever. And I think some people just ignore what they're doing, and it's almost as if a lot of people don't care about their policies on other things and how they're treating the ordinary people. And so I think in that sense, I would rather there was less focus on it and more focus on the cost to the poor of their policies, and giving a realistic alternative to how we could do things differently. You know, there's a certain element of there's strong leadership, even if it's awful leadership. It's decisive, and we need to show, well, there's something different we can do. We can do this different, and that would give a more positive vision. You know, note what they've done, but yeah, move on then and try and do something different.
Yeah, I mean, I think Boris Johnson's a gift to the independence movement, but from the personal side, with people dying and the insensitivities of the government, it's been horrible to watch. There's other things going on that deserve to be getting attention, and they're not getting the attention that they deserve, but again, because of the selfishness of the government. Now, I'm going to come to you for your thoughts on it.
Well, since Scotland didn't actually vote Tory, I feel kind of a bit devoid from the Boris Johnson and his party. I'd like to move a little closer to where it really affects us, in as much as the Green Party. Who could remember? Who could forget Ross and Patrick Harvey and Lorna Slater in the Edinburgh pub when there was restrictions on? And they just went awfully sorry about that. It's terribly sorry. I mean, it's just like, wait a minute here, hold on. We were all restricted. We were all sticking to it. And because you're an MSP, you should be better than this. And then you've got Margaret Ferrier jumping on the train. And I was on the train. I was commuting initially, and then I was staying at home. Ferrier arrogantly not resigning, not falling on the sword on the train with COVID. I mean, it was just like, both cases are not as bad as Boris and his party pals, but it strikes home more the fact that Ross Greene and the poisoned dwarf Harvey and the Canadian Lorna Slater, who are now part of junior ministers in the SNP government, who just came in the back door. And they should know better. They should be the shining example instead of tut at Boris. Oh, he should resign. Mate, you want to look closer to home. I just feel a bit devoid of Boris because he's in England. We didn't vote for him. We're kind of stuck with him. Nothing's going to happen to him. I even had a bet with a friend of mine. He reckoned that Boris would go in a couple of weeks. And I went, nah, forget it. He's going to be here for months. Because I found a clip, a YouTube clip, where Boris said himself, if you create enough messes, enough mistake after mistake after mistake, people get confused with the mistakes, and you can just kind of breeze past it. And his actions did exactly that. It was just one party, one after the other. And he sort of, it was when Boris was younger. But it's a self-fulfilling policy. I mean, it's like premeditated. But I think the Greens are like save the planet and all the rest of it, and they're just at the capers as well. I mean, it's the worst.
Well, you've just let your guard down there now. I'm disappointed because it proves to show that you've not watched the past couple of Tweet Street episodes, because I cut that video through to the videos.
Hey, did you? Is that where I saw it?
Well, there you go. Good recovery. I'll give you that one, mate. I'll give you that one.
Was it? Okay. Maybe just give me a shovel.
Right. No, you did. That's a good recovery, actually. Well done. Right. So that's where you've seen it. No, we're going to get back to the ISP, and there's a conference coming up. So, Julie, I'm going to come to you. Can you tell me when the conference is and what people should expect to hear from the conference?
Well, we're still firming up the details at the moment, but I don't know. We're looking for resolutions going forward. We're not quite sure what the program's going to be as yet. I'm not sure if Brooke has more information, perhaps.
I know the date. It's going to be the 19th of March, a Saturday, and it's going to be in Dundee. And that's about all we can say so far. But there's some really exciting speakers lined up, and a bunch of resolutions that are just now being submitted, and they're going to be looked over by the policy committee, and hopefully we'll get some good ones to do with local government. So
excellent. Now, talking about local government, Niall, I'll come to you just to see, are you going to be attending this conference, or is there an online facility?
When is it? Sorry,
19th of March. We spoke about it, and you may actually be unavailable.
I might be incapacitated.
Yeah.
Right.
But if it's on, yeah, game on. I'll tutor along to that, and it's safe. There isn't another variant like the B2, the A1. Paper sizes now the variants.
Yeah, the A4 variant, yeah, the A3 variant. Yeah, we're not joking. We're not joking about COVID. I need to make that clear. We're just joking about all the different names that come about as a result of these variants. The ISP conference. The ISP manifesto. Sorry, I would like to ask what some of your own personal highlights from the manifesto are. And what I'll do is when you're answering, I'm going to put a wee screen share on for this and put the manifesto up on the screen. You can tell me, and I'll try and get to the parts that are your own personal favourites. I'm not saying I'll be as quick as you are at saying them, but I'll try and get to that. So I'll do a wee screen share first of all. And Julie, I'll ask you what your personal, no personal favourite, because obviously it's a manifesto, so you're bought into it all. But there are obviously things that differentiate between each individual. That's something that I'm more interested than less interested, and so on and so forth. So I'll just display the here we go. And you'll probably see my emails first of all, but I'll edit this out because it's the manifesto I'm looking for. There we go. So this is the ISP's manifesto. So Julia, I'll come to you first of all, and just you speak about the parts of the manifesto, and I'll try and get to it on screen here.
Well, obviously I've got an interest in the gender stuff, our attitude to the Gender Reform Act. I'm also interested particularly in our attitude to Europe as well, because we're not going hell-bent back into the EU. We would prefer to go into EFTA first and restore the free movement of goods and persons, services and so on. And possibly go into the EU after that. I think that's a bit of a failing with Nicola Sturgeon, is that she decided we're going back into the EU, and that's it. And I think that's something that we have to decide, as you know, the whole of Scotland has to decide that afterwards. So that's one of my favourites. Obviously, the gender things, and the idea going forward of sustainability. All our various ideas on sustainability and affordable housing is a big one as well, because I think they go together. So yeah, that's my favourites, I think.
I just displayed the Europe section there, and just confirming what you'd said about not straight into the EU. It's more going into EFTA, the European Free Trade Association. Brooke, I'll come to you. What's your highlights from the manifesto?
Well, my favorite is UBI, but I've already banged on about that a bit. But it is one of our policies, and probably the next biggest thing is the Green New Deal and land reform, because I was quite shocked actually when I realized I could vote, and then looked into the Green Party a bit and went, where's the green? Where's the, like we really only have a very, very limited time to try and actually, keep the planet livable. And especially Scotland and the state of, the hills and everything. It's been deforested. There's no large mammals, the deer are everywhere, the sheep are everywhere. And it's very hard for somebody that doesn't have a lot of money to get a little bit of land to grow food on, which is something I'd like to do in the future. And so, yeah, forestry, creating a little food forest, and land reform to actually make it accessible to people, so there can be a hutting culture like all the other countries that are kind of along the same line as us enjoy. So yeah, those are my big favorites.
Naya, and over to you. What's having your eye on the manifesto, the ISP manifesto?
Well, it's the gender one for the equalities. You know, the making sure that 52% of the population aren't stuck away on the shelf for the 1%, the MOPs, as I call them, the most oppressed people ever. The trans, the ones that are perpetual trans, will always be trans and want all their rights, because it's not like the reverse of the needs of the few outweigh the needs of the many. The Spocks, but I like the idea of the transport. If you want to get a green society, then you've got to get the transport better. I mean, the transport in Europe is fabulous. Trains actually arrive on time. Here it's like something like St. Trinian's, the trains we've got. And actually, the other one that I quite like is the drug policy. Because at the moment, the Scottish government are arguing that we want to do this, but the UK government won't allow us. And the people involved in drugs have got these banners saying, "You keep talking and we keep dying." So yeah, for the drug addiction, to decriminalize it, because this war on drugs, you're wasting your time. You're not going to win that. I've always been. I mean, when I was younger, it's like Bill Clinton. I inhaled, but I took a drop. I never inhaled. I did inhale the cannabis, but I stopped it yonks ago. I mean, I don't go near it. But that kind of drugs. I mean, if you control if you make it legal, then to an element you control the quality and you control the price and you get rid of the gangsters, and certainly better treatment for the drugs and the drug addicts, because it's not getting better and people are dying, literally dying, because they can't seem to agree between the UK government and the SNP government. They're just not seem to. Well, they're blaming each other. Meanwhile, people are dying. Our own people are dying.
Yeah, and that's a very sad reality of the situation. People are dying while most political parties are too busy playing politics.
That's exactly what they're doing. And our own people are dying, and they keep going on about Scottish this, and we look after Scotland. No, you don't. People are dying from it because it's not working. Whatever we've been doing in the past is not working. Yeah,
that's yeah. There needs to, because we've been going at it and going at it and going at it. I totally agree, and we're coming up against the same obstacles time and time again. So for me lets us know we're not doing the right things. We're not channeling the right way. We need to be trying alternatives. We need to be listening to people that have lived experiences. And it seems to be that if you've got a lived experience, you're thought less of. For somebody who's been nowhere near that experience with a pen and a piece of paper, and it's like, oh, yeah, it's again, we need to have fresh ideas. We've been going, as I say, going at it repeatedly, and that's insanity when you try and do the same thing repeatedly and expect a different outcome, and it comes back the same number of deaths. I'll just ask your thoughts. I'll come to you, Naya, first of all, your thoughts on just general betterment of Scotland, and how do you feel that it should be achieved?
Well, I think I have been speaking to a lot of my friends who were SNP, and I know a couple of people who are adamant. I mean, they had the SNP flags, and they've all changed their tune. They've all moved to other parties. I mean, they're utterly scunnered because it gets. I mean, it's a bigger size. I mean, look at the Tories. They've been in power such a long time. Look at the corruption. SNP will go the same way. They're far too complacent. They think it's a never-ending job. It's always going to be there. And the betterment is SNP to get a shock in the polls, and other parties to come in, because that's the only way there's going to be change. Because I mean, how many years do you need, Nicola? And blaming Westminster, and on the trans side, you've got the trans activists that are like they're the mad ones. But then if you go into Twitter and you type in SNP something against Queen Nicola, you get the Scottish SNP at you. You get the drones at you. They're the radical ones, and they're, oh, you want to be ruled by the Tories. We're back to this again. You can't keep blaming Scott. I mean, the drug is a case in point. Yes, SNP want to change it, UK, but people are dying it, and you're still arguing.
Yeah, still arguing about it. I agree. Julie, I'll come to you next.
Well, I think what I found worrying with the Scottish government is it seems very out of touch. They're not actually, the Scottish government's not actually an advert for independence, to be honest, at the moment. Not only not going for it, but they're pushing niche policies. They're going back on party policies that they've adopted, like the Public Energy Company. And then they've decided, oh, we couldn't actually do that after all. Well, why did you promise it then? And there are people like George Kervin that say, yes, you could do it. You know, that's a moot point. I think things have to work more for the people in Scotland than they do. I think we're just turning into drones. You know, we're there to pay our taxes and nothing else, and keep quiet. I think that there's so many, you know, it looked like it was all ticking along all right, and then there's all sorts of things have been exposed by the pandemic, like mental health's not financed well enough, nearly well enough. Health services in general seem to be creaking quite worryingly. And you know, I sort of feel that money's been taken from everything else and thrown at the pandemic, which is understandable, but you know, it's exposed the weaknesses. And you know, for people like in the inner cities, life's no different now than when there wasn't a Scottish government at all. You know, for the ones that are caught in that, you know, and it's partly to do with drugs. It's poverty and hopelessness and drugs, and nothing's changed for them. It doesn't matter if they're ruled by Westminster or Scotland. They're still dying decades before they should. So I think we should be taking more of a holistic approach to everything and to tackling poverty. You know, you've got things like helping close the attainment gap, for example, and helping kids from poorer backgrounds. But that sort of stops when they leave university. It doesn't go on to, well, most of the good jobs are in Edinburgh, Glasgow, and that's unaffordable, and it's unaffordable because you've done nothing about rent controls, and it's like a whole deck of cards, you know, that I feel that they seem to have abandoned. That's my worry, is that they're not really looking at policies anymore. They're just looking at something that's a niche policy and running with that. I don't know if it's to take our mind off what they're doing elsewhere or not doing elsewhere. I don't know. So I think they should take, there should be more of an attack on poverty and looking at all the things that impact on that, which is housing and education and drugs, things like that, everything that impacts on it. And that would be a good place to start, I think.
Yeah, thank you very much, Julia. Brooke, I'll come to you, just the same.
For me, for the people that are now deciding actually maybe they don't support independence because they don't want the SNP to have total power, look at UKIP. I really don't think the SNP are going to be voted in once we're independent, because at the moment people are voting for them because they want independence, and a lot of people that are not happy with their policies and not happy with what they've done the last few years, they're still voting because that's what they're holding on to, is they're the ones that are going to deliver it because that's what they've been told. And I think at a certain point, because ISP exists now and ALBA exists now, there's enough of a fire under them that actually they might decide, we are going to have to do this, because they're little, you know, I think they're getting quite comfy down in London, and now maybe in Europe, putting their little feet in, going, oh, well, we'll have a little thing here and we'll do a little. It's like, no, that's not how it works. People aren't going to take it. And once Scotland is independent, we're going to need a lot more small parties. People need a lot of options. There's going to be a lot to be done, and everybody needs to get involved. So, you know, it'll just be the beginning, and not this current situation, but worse, which is, I think, what a lot of people are imagining, because everyone's in scarcity mindset. Things have been really hard for a lot of people for a really long time. And when you're under that kind of duress, you can't think clearly. You can't really see an optimistic, hopeful future because you're just in the shit. And you kind of, you know, And I think with independence, the idea that actually everything could be different and we could have this green, rich country where there's no poverty is like, that's not possible. It's like, actually it is. Scottish people are amazing. And I don't think the population has been able to do what it's capable of doing for a very, very long time.
Yeah, it's refreshing to hear. I would also like to hear, you're going to be standing some candidates for the local council elections. That's still to be confirmed. All of the wards, or not all of the wards that they're stood in, but the wards that they will be standing in. Is there an estimate of when likely we can expect
the candidates are going to be announced at the conference?
Right, okay.
So March 19th, we're going to be announcing our candidates, and we are trying to cover not every single ward, but all the localities. That's our goal. So we're still getting people on, because obviously local government, it's very different from being an MSP in terms of, you know, the money's different and the amount of responsibility is different. And, you know, our party members are very busy doing their jobs in addition to everything for the party. So.
Well, it's good to hear. It's refreshing to hear, because I'm independent through and through. I believe that Scotland will thrive as an independent nation. I believe that we've been held back, first of all, by Westminster for decades, and of late the SNP. I can't deny it. And like each person that's been on here, I used to vote for the SNP because I believed that they would deliver independence. I can no longer, in good grace, give them a vote, because everything that I see of late tells me that, well, I'm a bigot because I don't believe in the GRA. I am not the right type of independence supporter because I want independence now. And all of these things, they have an effect, and pride comes before a fall. And I think they're going to fall very, very hard, especially with the announcement of late. And I don't know if you've seen this, because this is relatively new news, or the past 24 hours. So, and I know that you're busy doing other things. The 6 oil fields that the UK government are going to be drilling on in Scotland, obviously they taking it back further. The sell-off of the renewables at a much reduced rate for 150 times more than it was initially mooted for. So it was 10 gigawatts and it ended up being 24 gigawatts that was rented out or sold out for 25 years. So people are, and Scottish people, and when I say Scottish people, that I mean anybody who lives in Scotland, who has that feeling, oh, Scotland has been a better nation out with the Union, are starting to see the masks slipping, and starting to see that they've been called all sorts of different things when they haven't changed. The only thing that's changed is the party of independence. And I'm so pleased that we now have the ISP, and we have also the Alba Party coming up really quickly and giving people that want change an alternative, and hopefully that the means to enact that change. So thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for doing what you're doing. I don't want to let you go, because I want to kind of make this official. Julie, that's swans in the background on your wallpaper, isn't it?
Yes, it is. For Swansea.
Are you a Swansea fan?
Oh yes, yes I am. Excellent. In fact, they're playing now, and I don't know if they're losing. They might be losing. They're not doing very well at the minute. So,
well, hopefully, when we get to an end, you can get to find out what the result is. But if there's a message that anybody wants to put out before we finish up, Niall, I'll come to you first of all.
Not really, other than vote ISP if you want your rights protected as men and women, I suppose. Because the GRA and the EHRC and Scottish Government, when it's a hark back to when you said when I'm talking about the drug deaths, and you need to get people who are specialists in that area, in anything. I mean, transport, get specialists who've got first-hand experience. I've got first-hand experience, and I get ignored.
Yep.
Because they just don't believe that I could possibly know what I'm talking about. And when I get told I'm a woman, it drives me bats, because I'm not. I just do not understand. I mean, I don't understand the female psyche in a lot of things. You know, like, what?
You and me both.
Same with the guys. Like, what? But I identify with women. That's as close as I'm going to get to being on the women front. I identify with you. I'm not you. I even had a bonding moment with my sisters where I said to them, "Look, sister, I can identify with you, but I have no idea what it's to be you. Don't, you know." We can talk about when my sister went to little sister went to Boots and she was looking at the makeup and she was trying this. She went, "God, this." She was painting her nails. She's going, "I'm not very happy with this. It's a bit thin." And the woman walked past and went, "That's lipstick, madam." And I was like, "God, sis, you're such an embarrassment. So you are."
Oh,
So that's, I mean, that's the kind of bonding moment we have. But other than I've said to them, I said, "Look, I'm like you and identify with you, but as being you, if you start talking about periods, and unless it means having a bad curry, I don't know what you're talking about."
Brooke, I'll come to you. A final message.
Well, just, you know, to encourage people to vote for ISP in the local elections, but also just to encourage people to imagine that actually everything could be different. It could be better. And it's not this pie in the sky idea. I know a lot of people have been ground down and the SNP likes to make noises like, "Oh, well, we're doing our best." They're not. They could be doing a lot better. And I think the existence of ISP is, you know, putting a little bit of a fire under them and has put a little bit of a fire under Alba. And it's just getting everybody thinking that actually, see all these policies, they're all doable. They're all achievable. None of them are pie in the sky. They might look that way, but they're really not. The people that developed them know what they're doing. And things could be much, much better very quickly.
Thank you, Brooke. Julia, final message?
I think it's very much the same type of thing. It's like, try not to get too down about the Scottish government. They are captured. They are, I don't know, they almost seem like another unionist party, but try and look past that. Vote for us in the local elections. And try and keep a vision of what Scotland can be like. And join us if you want to. You're welcome to join the party. So there you go.
We have really nice badges.
Yeah.
Thank you for having us on. It's been fun.
Thank you so much. It was a really nice chat.
Yeah, thank you. That was excellent. Yep.
Thank you very much, folks, for coming on. Excellent. Well, it just remains for me to say I would like to thank Julia Pennell, Brooke Rinn, and Naya Putso, all representing the ISP in their different forms. From Tweed Street Occupied Scotland for Cinnamon Bridges for the satirical satire. It's good night, and I hope you've enjoyed the offerings.